Welcome to our brief discussion on the order of operations. We only have one objective for this video, and that is basically to remind ourselves of how the order of operations work and how we can use it to simplify some of expressions and ultimately use it also to solve equations, right? Because the only difference between an expression and an equation is an expression is just a bunch of terms, a bunch of stuff, separated by pluses and minuses and division and multiplication, all that kind of stuff, without an equal sign and something on the other side. So just add an equal sign and put some more stuff on the other side, and all of a sudden you have an equation. So whatever we're learning here can be extrapolated to more advanced topics that might involve equations and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what are some of the basics? And why do we have to bother with them? Well, expressions, equations, oftentimes will have more than one operation. And by operations, we mean the four simple ones, right? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Those are your operations. You can, of course, have other operations like raising to a power, taking roots, which are really just powers in disguise, right? Because a square root is just a 1/2 power. And other operations as well, but we normally talk about the four main ones. But you can think of raising to a power or exponents as kind of being the fifth one. Well, if you have more than one operation in your expression or your equation, the question arises, which one do we do first, right? Do we just always go from left to right? Well, no, not necessarily. Some cultures read from right to left, right? So it wouldn't be fair to just always go from left to right. Math is an international language. Everybody's supposed to do math the same. So there is a rule, right? There's this order of operations agreement that tells us what we're supposed to do first, what we're supposed to do second, and so on and so forth. So if we have something as simple as just 4 plus 3 times 5, well, you would think, okay, do I do 4 plus 3, which gives me 7, and then do 7 times 5, which gives me 35? Well, no, that's not right. The rule is you're supposed to do the multiplication first, 3 times 5, and get 15, and then 15 plus 4 is 19. So you can see there's a huge difference between 19, the correct answer, and 35, the incorrect answer, and thus that is why we have these rules. Okay, so what are the basic rules? First, you do anything that's inside parentheses. And if there are parentheses inside parentheses, then you go inside those parentheses, right? It's basically you go into the innermost set of parentheses and work your way out. So all of these rules are generalized rules, but they can be used with the more specific examples if you just realize that this is a general rule, right? You go inside the parentheses, and then once you're inside the parentheses, everything starts over and you look at the rules again. And so then the rules, you go back to step 1 and you say, okay, do all the things inside the parentheses. So if you're inside a set of parentheses and there's another set of parentheses, then all you're doing is resetting and going back to step 1. Then you go inside those parentheses and then you go back to step 1 and you check. And if there's no parentheses inside that set, then you move on to step 2, which says simplify any numerical expressions that contain exponents. A big fancy way of saying raise everything to the power first. And since we already mentioned that square roots are just powers in disguise, right? A square root is just a 1/2 power, and a cube root is a 1/3 power, and so on and so forth. You would also do any roots, right? So radicals and roots, same thing. So you do all your powers at this point inside that most inner set of parentheses, right? Because we're still sitting there, so we're still going to go through all those 4 steps. After we've done the powers, then we're going to multiply and divide together as a pair, because multiplication and division are the same thing. So they happen together. You work from left to right, doing all multiplication and division as it occurs. So if you have 4 plus 3 times 7, you would do the 3 times 7 first. And then blah, 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 you go along and you find a find then you do the division, and then you find another multiplication, you do the multiplication, right? So you're doing all multiplication division from left to right. Once you're done with that, you move on, and the last step is to do all the addition and subtraction, again, from left to right as a pair. So if the first thing you come across is a subtraction, you do that first. even though it says addition and subtraction, there's no implied order, right? You don't do multiplication before division. You do multiplication and division together as a team from left to right, and then you do addition and subtraction together as a group from left to right. All right, let's look at a few simple examples, right? What do we do first? Well, we go inside the parentheses. Inside the parentheses, the only thing, then we start over and go, okay, are there more parentheses inside the parentheses? No. So we move to the second thing. Are there any powers inside the parentheses? No. Okay, is there any multiplication or division? No. Is there any addition and subtraction? Yes. So that's what we'd finally do. We would do the addition and subtraction, which 6 plus 4 is 10. So you can see our first step would now be 5 times 10 minus 2 cubed. Now that we're done with what's ever inside the parentheses, we move outside the parentheses and we redo the rules all over again. Are there parentheses? No, not really. Yes, I know these are parentheses, but they really aren't. What these parentheses are doing is they're taking the place of a multiplication symbol, right? So it really isn't parentheses. It's kind of a pseudo parentheses. But anyhow, so then move on to the second one. Do we have powers? Yes, we do. We've got the 2 cubed, so we do that. So now we have 5 times 10 minus 8. We're done with all the powers. Then we come back to multiplication and division, which is just this one. So there's the 50. Then we finally do the addition and subtraction, and that's how we get 42. Simple, right? Easy. Okay. Make it a little bit more, let's say, robust, and we get something that might look like this. Now, this is a pretty typical question you come across in algebra classes where they ask you to evaluate an expression with certain variables. They tell you that a equals 6, b equals 1, c equals 3. You're supposed to plug them in and, do what you got to do. So if we plug in the numbers, we now have this, right? And we do the order of operations. We've got some parentheses, so we do those first. That becomes a 4. So now we have this expression, right? What are we going to do next? We're going to raise it to a power. So we raise that to a power. That gives us 16. Then we do the multiplication. Then we finally do the subtraction. All right? So it doesn't matter how complicated or convoluted these things get. The rules stay the same. So here's another basic example. Inside the parentheses first, that gives us the 9, right? That's the only thing that's changed. Now from here down to here, what do? We do the power. That gives us 16, right? Now from here down to here, we're going to work from left to right and do division and multiplication. So first we do 18 divided by 9, which is 2. So here's 2 times 9 minus 16, right? Then we'd come across and do the multiplication. 2 times 9, that gives us 18. Then we finally do the subtraction, and our final answer is 2. All right, let's look at a last couple that might hopefully be a little bit more advanced to challenge you a little bit, but probably not. This is pretty basic stuff. So what we do first, inside the parentheses, right? 16 minus, well, now we've got 13 minus 5 gives us 8, and then we still have divided by 4. Okay, now no more parentheses, we have no powers, right? So now we go to division and multiplication. The only one we have is this one. So that becomes 16 minus 2. Now the last thing is to do this actual work, and we just get an answer of 14. All right, how about this one? Inside the parentheses, right? So we have 3 squared, that doesn't change, plus 5 doesn't change, but now we have multiply by 6 minus 2 is 4. Now we raise the power, so that's 9, right? Plus 5 times, that's a times 4. And then we do the multiplication, 9 plus 20. And then finally we do the addition and we get 29. All right, that's it, guys. Doesn't matter how complicated things get, just do those 4 steps and you can tackle all of them.